Historic preservation helps freeze time. It helps capture monumentous events for future generations. Public historians work hard to make local history come alive and save it for future generations as well. They want to ensure that people understand it's not just the bigger moments of the event that happened. It's about the people who lived through them, their lives, their families. Just behind me is a feeder branch of the Little Conemaugh River. This feeder branch flowed down to what is known as Conemaugh Lake. 132 years ago, this creek flowed into what was known as Conemaugh Lake. Conemaugh Lake was located in Sidmon, Pennsylvania. This lake was the home of South Fork Hunting and Fishing Club. The South Fork Hunting and Fishing Club was renowned for its prominent exclusive membership. Some of the members that frequented Conemaugh Lake were Andrew Carnegie, Andrew Mellon, and Henry Frick. Conemaugh Lake was renowned for its fishing. There was a lot of big fish within the dam. A problem that was happening is the fish were escaping over the spillway. The image here shows that in 1879, the members decided to cut the height of the dam, and they widened it. You could have fit 2 lanes of traffic across the top of it. This was done to prevent those fish from escaping and jumping over the spillway. 10 years later, on May 30th, it began to rain. Such heavy rainfall, it lasted the whole way through the night. And the next morning, members of the Hunting and Fishing Club went out and saw that the water level has risen about 2 feet from the night before. On May 31st, at 3 p.m., the dam broke. It sent 20 million tons of water cascading down the mountain to the city below. The flood waters went through the region known as Mineral Point. It decimated Woodvale and then went down into Johnstown. The wave of water stood at between 35 and 40 feet tall, traveling at 40 miles per hour. The Johnstown Area Heritage Association's website relates the amount of water that rushed out of Conemaugh Lake to what you would see flowing over Niagara Falls in a period of about 36 minutes. So this wave of water was just tremendously terrifying, and it was going to crush anything in its path. The water went through Johnstown to what's known as Stone Bridge. It's a bridge. I'll show you guys an image here in a few minutes of it, where a lot of the debris got stuck. About 30 acres worth of debris were stuck. And to make matters worse, we have a flood that decimated homes, traveled so quickly it swept people away. The debris that got caught on the bridge caught on fire, and that led to many more deaths. Here at Stone Bridge, the debris is caught. Bodies were found as far away as Cincinnati and as late as the year 1911. 1,600 homes were destroyed by the flood, and more than $17 million in property damage occurred. More than 750 victims were never identified, and they were buried at Grandview Cemetery in the Plot of the Unknown, which is shown here. This is the site today of where Conemaugh Lake used to lie. Here is the Little Conemaugh River, and this entire area is where the lake used to fill. This is now the site of the Johnstown Flood National Memorial Site. The Johnstown Area Heritage Association, the JAHA, works with historians to preserve the local history of the Johnstown floods. This is the memorial lights that were placed on the stone bridge. This site every year is lit up to remember the victims of the 1989 flood. This site is the Johnstown Flood Museum. Within this museum, you can see videos and documentaries made on the Johnstown flood. There are exhibits illustrating the debris piles that were collected at Stonebridge. You can learn many more. There are a lot of exhibits within that are geared towards children to get them involved in the history of Johnstown. The Johnstown Area Heritage Association has created what's known as the Discovery Center. The Discovery Center houses the Children's Museum. Within that museum, there's a flood model. Children can build a dam that replicates the Conemaugh Lake and fill it with water. They can then watch the dam burst and the floodwaters rush down to the city below. The public history that is available and preserved through the Discovery Center, the lake site, Stonebridge, and the Johnstown Flood Museum allows citizens of both Johnstown and the surrounding areas to come visit and learn more about the floods. You heard me right, I said floods. Johnstown has been flooded on 3 separate occasions. The 1889 flood, which was the biggest flood, and the one we just spoke about. The 1936 flood, much smaller, and then the 1977 flood, which again was a little bit on the larger side. Families of this region have stories passed down from generation to generation about people who witnessed the flood and survived the flood. The Neff family is one such family that has an extensive history with the flood. My maiden name is Neff. This is my family. Pictured here is my grandfather, Bernard Neff, and his grandmother. His grandmother lived through the 1889 flood. She was a resident of South Fork, Pennsylvania. This was located right off of the foot of the dam. Stories have been passed down through my family that talk about her experience with the flood. She heard reports that the dam broke. They went out onto the porch and they watched the wall of water rush down towards the city of Johnstown. Now, like I said before, imagine this wall of water is 35 to 40 feet tall, traveling at 40 miles an hour. They said it sounded louder than a freight train going through. She's not the only person in my family who has a history with the flood. My grandmother, Violet Neff, was 16 when the 1936 flood went through Johnstown. In this flood, unlike the 1889 flood or the 1977 flood, there weren't dams that broke. It just started storming and it rained and rained, and that caused a flood. This was the smallest of the 3 floods. But my grandma Violet went to go to school. She went to school in what was known as Ferndale School District. Her and her brother went out to walk to school on a normal day. It was raining so hard that Grandma decided she was not going. She did not trust the storm. It seemed weird. Her brother went off to school. He was not afraid and he wouldn't be kept home. That day, it flooded. Her brother was stuck at Ferndale School District for 3 days. He could not come home. Eventually, they did manage to find their way home. They had to walk up through an area known as Westmont to get there. It would have been a very long and exhausting walk home, I'm sure. My grandmother, I'm sure, got a kick out of the fact that her brother knew better and went to school and she was home safe. She passed away many years ago. I can't ask her about this anymore. However, my dad tells the story of her experiencing this flood. This picture is my parents 2 years after the 1977 flood. I absolutely love this picture. But They talk about the night of the flood. It happened on my dad's birthday, July 20th in 1977. They lived on what's known as Beach Hill Road, and they said it just started raining, and it poured down rain. It rained for, I believe it was 6 hours, and that's what started the flood. My grandparents lived a short, but probably 3 miles away from their home at this time, and they always talk about my grandpa's dog, Pup. I know, original name for a dog. But Pup was tied out back. He was a hunting dog, and when the flood came through, the water came the whole way up through my grandparents' backyard, which is over an acre back to the creek. The water came up and swept Pup away. They were devastated that the dog was missing, and they went hunting for him the next day, and they found him caught by the collar on a branch down the creek. He was fine. It was never quite right when it rained again, but he continued to hunt and lived a nice long life. But many people were affected by the 1977 flood. People died. Houses were washed away. It was a very devastating flood, even though it was smaller than 1889.
If it wasn't for historic preservation, many of these local histories and family histories would be lost. Historic events are very important, but the construct of society is what helps bring us back together in the aftermath of such devastating events such as the Johnstown flood. Thank you for listening.